It has been 66 long days since Lando Norris was crowned champion in Abu Dhabi. But now we go again. This time, though, with new regulations in F1's biggest shake-up in over a decade. And today, we're breaking down our 5 biggest takeaways from day one of testing. We've been checking out Cadillac. Sam's been snooping on the new tech. We've caught up with Williams, Mercedes. They look strong, as do McLaren. And then, of course, we've got Max Verstappen at Red Bull. But as you can see, we are outside the new kids on the block, Cadillac. So that's where we're going to start. I'm Betty Glover. This is Sam Collins and Lawrence Barretto. Lawrence, tell us about Cadillac then. Are you impressed with what you've seen so far?
Absolutely. Welcome to Formula One's 11th team, the newest kid on the block. Like you said, they only found out a year or so ago that they were definitely kind of going to be in the grid for this season. So the job that they've done to get that team ready, to build up their facility at Silverstone, to get their facility in America online for the end of this year, to have a race car that hit the ground in the shakedown. We've lost Sam because he's just having a look. Come on along.
I could look at the Ferrari power unit for the first time.
That's what was getting you excited. The fact that they've had this opportunity to get the shakedown done so early, they fired up in December as well, and they've had a race car at the shakedown and here, and they've run faultlessly today. Phenomenal job.
They also look so good in the black and the white. I love it.
The livery's cool, isn't it?
The livery is very, very cool.
Medical car. I
noise.
do like the livery, but what I really like is the design of the car. It doesn't look like a debutante car from a team that didn't exist a year ago. It looks like a together racing car that any team could produce and be proud of.
Well, Pat Simmons was saying earlier, technical consultant at the team there, that actually a few teams have said to him, actually there's some cool details on that car, and I think that's a massive sign of respect for rivals to come along and to say that to a new team on the block. They haven't gone basic, have they? They've really tried to push the envelope.
It's very Pat Simmons, and Nick Chester as well, I think, needs to get some credit for this. As technical leads on that car, they've come up with some really lovely, and it's exactly what the team's told you, really lovely, intricate details. This isn't a car that will just get it on the grid. This isn't like 2010 where they just had 3 teams that were just trying to get onto the grid. This is a team that's turning up, and I know they've made some comments in the media about, we're not going to score points this year or something. Actually, I think that's nonsense.
I do wonder, when you hear some of this and when you've got team principals that are playing it down, I do think, are you playing mental games with us, Cadillac?
Yes, they are.
But it's sensible, isn't it, I guess? They don't want to kind of put too much pressure on themselves heading out there. And they're coming up against teams who have been competing in this sport for many, many years. They know how to do this. I think they're just trying to play it down, but they've got such great people at that team. They've recruited really well from up and down this paddock, so they've got a ton of experience. So I'm excited to see what they can do.
I'm very excited. We've just walked past Alpine. They're looking pretty good, and we're about to walk past Audi. Now, Sam, at the beginning I said that you've been snooping, you've been having a look at different things, but Audi, they've really stood out to you, haven't they? Why?
Well, I think if I spent any more time outside their garage, I'd have 4 rings on my back. I mean, I've really been obsessing about that car because you may have seen some photos of the car from their launch or from the pre-season shakedown in Barcelona. This isn't that car. They've essentially brought a completely new car to this test. It looks completely different. It's got those Mercedes-style zero pods. It's got some really clever details on the floor, particularly just underneath the nose, where I had to go and ask some really senior engineers, how are you even allowed to do that? They've got some stuff that other teams have not even thought of, I think. So that car is incredibly interesting. It doesn't look incredibly together yet. It seems to be getting a bit hot at the rear. It's got some scorch marks on it, and it smells like burning every time it comes out of the garage. But that is a fascinating piece of equipment. It's also incredibly loud compared to every other car, and I don't understand that at all.
We need to get into this. I think we need to ask around, because that Audi is so loud, Lawrence, isn't it?
Yeah, so I did the Ferrari shakedown earlier at Maranello, but I wasn't at Barcelona, so I wasn't aware of this really quite pungent noise when they fire up the car.
That's a good way of describing it.
It is almost quite scary if you're not expecting it. So, and I've heard that Audi's is the loudest. Maybe we need to do a decibel chart to see who's the loudest and who's the softest.
We've got the technology for that, actually.
There we go.
Let's give it a go.
Yeah,
I think we do.
Excellent. We'll do that on day 2.
Yeah.
And then we'll let you guys know how it goes.
We are halfway down the pit lane, and that's where Williams are. And this is a massive step up from where they normally are. They're normally down the other end of the field. After finishing P5 in the championship, they've moved up a little bit further.
But that's a massive step down in the amount of aerodynamic testing that they could do on this car, and that will hurt them in terms of the car development as the season goes on, at least until mid-season.
Sam, surely they'll take the hit. It was a great finish last year, 2 podiums. They're not going to finish further back to get more testing time.
And that was using a car that wasn't even new. That was a year-old car by that point. So what they can do with this should be pretty special.
James Vowles last season was banging on about how he was just looking towards 2026 when you're sort of asking about the car. So Sam, what have you noticed about this car?
Well, what I've noticed about it is it's just really intricate. At first, my first impression of it was like, oh, is that it? I expect a bit more. And then I looked a bit longer, and I think it's because the paint job is a slightly modified version of last year's. It almost looks like an iteration of last year's car. But the longer you look at it, you start noticing really lovely little details on the sort of barge board sections, those sort of sticky-uppy bits that come out of the leading edge of the floor. Inside those, and nobody else has done this, there's an additional aerodynamic element that sticks up, and it's really, really interesting that they've found areas to explore in the regulations that no other team has looked at. But I'm going to stand like a stuck record on that because every team has got stuff that nobody else has looked at, and I think there's a lot of very busy engineers staring at screens like now, right now, just going, oh, we hadn't thought of that.
Well, and I imagine there'd be more eyes on Williams than any other team because obviously they missed the shakedown in Barcelona. They were delayed with production, which meant they didn't have the car ready for that test. So they've done a filming day at Silverstone. They've done another filming day yesterday here in Bahrain. And then they've hit the ground running with that massive lap count today. So I think it shows the real steep progress that team have made from a couple of weeks ago. It was looking pretty bleak, to be honest.
It's really interesting, isn't it? We spoke to James Vowles, didn't we, after day one of testing, and he seemed quite positive. I don't know if you guys got that vibe as well, but I felt like, oh, this isn't a man that's panicking right now.
I think you could have some absolute terrible calamity. The entire factory could fall into a sinkhole or something like that, and he'd still have some positive and really professional spin to put on it. He's just that way. He's just very cool, calm and collected. But I think that's what you need in charge of a Formula One team.
And I think there is a genuine belief within that squad that, you know, they did the virtual track test when they weren't in Barcelona, so they did what they could to kind of check things like the cooling systems. And then they managed to get the car out of Silverstone. They've done 2 filming days worth, almost hitting the 200k mileage that you're allowed to do in filming days on both days. And then they've had another successful day here. He said basically if they get 6 days of good running here in very good conditions, it probably will make up for the fact they weren't in Barcelona, and then they'll get to the season and they will basically have caught up.
You hear about these virtual track days. I think we need to explain that because Williams keeps talking about it, and there is an allocation of that. If you use that, you lose some other running allocation during the season. What it essentially means is you put most of the real car with all of the real bits on it, rattle it all over the place on a shaking rig that bounces up and down and simulates driving around a real circuit while the wheels aren't actually turning properly. Everything else on the car is actually running and rattled and shaked and bashed and bounced using real track data. But it's not the same. It isn't the same. You haven't got real air flowing through, and you haven't got grit and dust and debris everywhere like you would on any racetrack in the world. So it's not quite the same, but they've turned up reliable, so it should be pretty good.
They've turned up, they've got the car out on day one of testing, and there's plenty more where that's come from, because it's just day one, guys. We've just walked past Ferrari. They were looking pretty solid. We're now walking past Red Bull Racing. So, Lawrence, we've got to talk about that man, Max Verstappen, doing Max Verstappen things. He's looking good, isn't he?
Yeah, he looked really good this morning. He was fastest in the morning break when they took an hour for lunch. And we've seen in previous years that Max has got this real ability to really just get stuck into a new car quite quickly, get into a methodical rhythm and just pile on the laps, pile them on and kind of G up the mileage. And he's done exactly that today. And I think for a team like Red Bull, who saw the kind of driver again that they've got in Max fighting for the championship in the last end of the last race of the season last year, to have that guy in the car and get all of that valuable feedback early doors on day one of the Bahrain test, I think bodes really well for them. And I think if you talk to teams up and down this paddock, they will tell you that they're really, really quietly impressed by the job that Red Bull have done. Maybe not just with the chassis, but with the power unit in the back of the car.
And I think the power unit is critical actually on this, because you're not talking about we've talked about a new manufacturer in the sport, we've talked about a new team, but this is a returning manufacturer, Ford, on the engine cover, but it's actually a new company that's manufacturing the power unit, which is Red Bull's own company. So working with Ford, they're putting together a new company from scratch, and that is quite a challenge as well. It's almost more difficult than putting together a new team. Let's not forget, General Motors still aren't ready with their new power unit, though it does look like it's going well there.
It really does, doesn't it? It's really interesting as we're walking along here. Like, obviously, everyone's sort of like packing things up a little bit. But I like listening to who's got what music on in the garages. And, you know, there's a bit of drum and bass coming from, I think it was somebody down there.
It was Williams, yeah.
Williams loved the drum and bass. It's really interesting.
Yeah, too right.
We've got to talk about Mercedes then. We're walking past them now. Now, they came into testing as, you know, the favourites. Everyone was like, ooh, I'm liking what this Mercedes looks like. Lawrence, are we still thinking like that?
Well, I think it's fair to say through Barcelona, they were the overwhelming favourites, really. I think because they had just such a solid test. There were no real problems. They piled on the mileage every single day, and then they came here, and I think after this morning, yeah, I think the belief was they are still favourites. George did almost a race distance worth of laps. There was general happy vibes. Then Kimi got in the car. He only managed one lap before he then spent a couple of hours in the garage. They've started to work on setup. So I think maybe of the top teams, of all of the teams, they're kind of working on areas that are more advanced, say, working on setup, starting to chase performance. And they found a niggle. So they had to sit in the garage for a couple of hours. They've cured it. I know Sam's got something to say on this. I can tell he's itching to say something. It wasn't a, yeah, exactly. It wasn't a PU issue, Sam, because it was.
Well, I was stood outside the garage when the issue happened, and they were hitting the car with a hammer, which is very un-Mercedes. Actually, a very un-Formula One thing to hear, but they were really hitting the car with a hammer. I heard through various sources that the issue was related to the suspension, which ties in with mucking about with the setup and getting that right. I think something just got a bit stuck, and then they had to understand what had really gone wrong and why it was that way. So I think they did have another problem. So it is a challenge, but that's the point of testing. If it does get stuck here, it doesn't matter.
It's definitely not panic stations,
No.
because they prefer it to happen here than in Melbourne in a couple of weeks' time when actually points are on the table. And like Sam said, you want these niggles to be happening now, and they've got so much mileage in the bank anyway that losing a couple of hours today really isn't an issue. And if they have a great day yesterday, everyone's going to forget about that pretty quickly.
You spoke to Toto Wolff as well. Did he say anything interesting?
He was trying to keep things calm, really. He didn't want to get too excited. He talked about how they discovered a few little niggles today, and that was around lunchtime. He was talking about the niggles that they'd discovered. But look, I think there is a general feeling within that team that they've just done a better job than they did with the ground effect cars. You know, they've had 4 years of just endless struggles, and so I think with these new rules, I think they do feel like they're on top of them. Whether or not they're the fastest or not, I think they're in the mix, and for them, that's a massive step forward.
The streets has it, though, that Toto also...
The
pit lane has it, I should say, that Toto Wolff also told the print media earlier in the day that looking at their data, and I think we have to take this with a large pinch of salt, Mercedes-branded salt, of course, that it's the Red Bull Ford power unit that has the biggest performance advantage over everybody, gaining a second on the straights, which
the mind games have started.
Absolutely, has it not? I think that's quite a claim. A second on the straights alone on this circuit seems a bit much to me.
We're here with the mind games again, guys. Oh, it always happens. Right, we've walked to the end and we're now outside the McLaren garage. Just a quick word. We can't wrap this up without just talking about McLaren, Lawrence, because they're looking really good as well. Everyone's looking good.
Yeah, look, I know we shouldn't read too much into the times here because we don't know what fuel loads everyone's running. We don't know what tyres they're running. But Lando was quickest. You know, they've had a solid day by the looks of it as well. And they are the defending champions, twice defending champions. So it looks like we could be in for a really good fight at the front. It's just super unclear which team is at the front.
With a major rule change, McLaren really shouldn't be as competitive as they look right now. They shouldn't be the fastest car. They don't have the biggest wind tunnel allowance. They have the smallest, and yet they still look good. McLaren can't be written off.
No, well, we're not writing anyone off, guys. It's pre-season testing. We're not making any sweeping judgments now. So here are the 5 things that we have learned from day 1 of pre-season testing. And stay tuned because there's going to be plenty more where all of this came from. Day 2's tomorrow. We'll see you then.